Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Revelation Hour, another fireside chat for this evening for you, just you alone. So if you are with me on Zoom or Facebook, on YouTube, I welcome you here this evening. We had a fantastic time last month. I think we talked about artificial intelligence and we were packed with so much information. So please, if you haven't watched it, please just go to our channel, go to Facebook, on YouTube channel, and try to access really the information that we're giving you as well. I think this is something that we want to do regularly over the next few months to begin to just tackle some of the very important topic that we are all concerned about. So today we are going to be talking about another topic here. We are going to be talking about Israel and the ceasefire. And if you have any question, please feel free to write it down on the chat. Whether you're on YouTube, you can write on the chat on YouTube. If you're on Zoom, you can write on the chat on the Zoom. So wherever you are, just please send your question along and we'll be happy to answer them. So I don't want to just waste too much time today. Today is another fireside chat about Israel. And just to give you a bit of a little appetite, I just want to play this video for you.
October 7th, 2023, Hamas launches the worst attack Israel has ever faced, resulting in the deaths of over 1,200 Israeli citizens and injuring hundreds more. It's the world's third most fatal terrorist attack in history, with only 9/11 and the 2014 Tikrit attack in Iraq being more deadly. This wasn't a random attack by Hamas, it was a carefully coordinated and orchestrated event, with almost every detail planned down to the minute, an attack nearly 3 years in the making. December 19th, 2020, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh declared the start of the first of a series of 4 combat drills that he dubbed Strong Pillar. The drills were planned to deliver a strong message and a sign of unity between Gaza's armed factions, with Hamas essentially forming a coalition with 10 other militant Palestinian groups to take part in a war games-style series of activities. They included the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or PIJ, along with the Al-Nasser Salah al-Din and Mujahideen brigades. These groups ran the gamut, as the BBC described, from hardline Islamist to relatively secular, but there was a common through line for all. Each shared a desire and willingness to use deadly force against Israel. September 10th, 2023. Less than a month before the attack on Israel, with Hamas confident it had drilled its fighters enough, it had also created an official command structure to unify its collection of extremist groups, which were now governed by a joint committee. That committee started publishing images to its official Telegram channel, showing men in uniforms surveilling Israeli military installations built along the Gaza border. The world didn't know it at the time, but those videos were yet more clues that Hamas was planning ways to bypass or overrun those military installations. September 12th, 2023. Hamas released videos of the fourth and last Strong Pillar military exercise. This time, footage emerged of Hamas fighters riding around in Toyota pickup trucks, many of which would be later spotted roaming around southern Israel in the days leading up to the October 7th attack. There was more footage of fighters raiding buildings and shooting targets inside, plus Hamas showed beach storming training videos involving boats and underwater divers. Another tactic Hamas would use less than a month later had emerged. By this point, Hamas had assembled a small army of 30,000 fighters within the Gaza Strip. It has also now established links with 10 other militia groups from which it could draw several thousand more fighters if needed. Hamas was ready.
Interesting short clip that I wanted just to really to play you as we begin to introduce this very important topic. I mean, we talked about Israel for quite a long time as well, and people may ask about there's always conflict in Israel, but I think it's very important to actually understand what's really taking place, or what's been taking place recently, and especially we're going to focus mainly on what happened recently in since 7th of October 2023, the attack that took place in Israel, and then just go a little bit deeper here. So to join this conversation on a fireside, I will be joined by Arlene Bridges Samuels, which is a weekly feature columnist for CBN Israel. She's also an author for the blog at Time of Israel. She's also a guest columnist, All Israel News and the Jerusalem Connection Report. She's also co-edited the Art Switch album Revisited, and she's a bard violin of Hope, South Carolina. And I was discussing with her yesterday. She's also mentioning to me, and I want to make sure that I don't forget, so I took it on my notes here. She's also part of the Christian media worldwide. So, you know, I want to invite Arlene here on the show here. So, good evening, Arlene. Oh, I would say actually good afternoon. You actually calling us all the way from Atlanta. I think it's about what, 4 p.m.?
Yes, it's coming up to about 5,
Oh,
but
coming
here
up
I
to
am
5.
in the southeast, and just really glad to be with you again, Jean-Marc.
It's wonderful to have you here. I mean, you've got so much knowledge, and as all your title, I was just getting a full page of all your title. I didn't want to miss anything at all. And I think for a lot of our listeners here, it's a very important topic that we really want to discuss about Israel. And I know that you got extensive knowledge and understanding of what's going on in Israel. And I think one of the first question and that I want to ask you here, and just to want to take our listeners, which are on YouTube, Facebook, and also on Zoom. If you have any question, please feel free to write it on the chat and we'll be trying to answer those questions. But my first question, I just really wanted to touch on Hamas. We talked a lot about what Hamas is doing, this organization, but I just wanted to maybe just give us a bit of a background, what Hamas is exactly and what led up to this attack last year or 2 years ago now, pretty nearly 2 years ago now.
Yes. Jean-Marc, anytime that we talk about Hamas, Hezbollah, any other terrorist groups, we always must go back to the foundation of what is going on. And
Mm,
that foundation is the Islamic regime. It's the leaders in Iran who are, of course, oppressing their own people. And as a matter of fact, Christians are in very much danger there, and there's a revival going on. But everything that Hamas does is funded by Iran. Hamas basically it is a terrorist organization. It's been designated as a terrorist organization for many, many years. So they're all about eliminating Jewish people, men, women, children, and babies. One of the most heartbreaking um, things that has gone on since 10/7.
mm,
Many of your listeners might remember the Bibas family. And
mm,
this is a family, Hamas kidnapped the mother, her baby, her 9-month-old baby, and her 3-year-old toddler,
mm,
took them into Gaza. And of course, all of Israel and all of us in the Christian community kept praying, hoping that they would come out alive.
mm.
But it was just revealed just a short, maybe less than a month ago, that they murdered a baby, a toddler, and their
Wow.
mother. And they let the dad out of Gaza.
Mm,
And it's just been absolutely the depths of evil have been plummeted, have been enacted by Hamas. They're addicted to hate. They're not only addicted to hating Jewish people, they're addicted to hating us, the
mm,
Christians. They're addicted to hating Muslims who do not agree with them.
mm.
So Hamas, there is really nothing good to be said about them.
Mm. This is quite very interesting because I think for many people it's the understanding and I think I was surprised because when last year when Israel started retaliating against what happened and then they start targeting Iran, I used to ask them why are they going all the way to Iran? But you actually pointed out that everything the funding come from Iran. So this is a very quite interesting point that you're pointing out here. And the other question, just you mentioned something yesterday in our conversation about a new resolution that you're discussed and that you are waiting on Donald Trump to kind of sign this resolution. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? So,
Yes, certainly. And I'm just really privileged to write for the Christian Broadcasting Network Israel,
mm,
considered part of worldwide Christian media. And many of us attended the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, the biggest one in the world, really, for Christian media. And at that conference, February 27th, we officially announced a resolution signed by 200 or more prominent Christian leaders. And I
mm,
was happy to be one of those signers. But those
Mm,
Christian leaders really represent about 60 million Americans who care
mm,
about Israel. And the resolution was sent to President Trump asking him to officially announce that he views Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel,
mm,
as under Israeli sovereignty. And this is an extremely important resolution. And we understand that in 2018, when President Trump was number 45 and now he's number 47 in his presidency, he promised that he would move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Israel's capital,
mm.
where it has been the capital for thousands of years. So we are hopeful that President Trump, at some point in his timing, will recognize the resolution that the Christian community in the United States has sent to him. We're very hopeful.
Why do you think this resolution is so important in 2 days, when it comes to Israel and kind of recognizing those Judea as well in that sense?
What has been going on for decades, Jean-Marc, is that the Palestinian community that lives in Israel, and they run a lot of their own cities, which was agreed to by the Oslo Accords in the 1990s. But what has happened is the Palestinians, they call it, and most of the world calls the biblical heartland the West Bank. Very simply, the West Bank is Israel that is west of the Jordan River. That's
Mm,
all it means.
mm,
It's a modern geographic term. But we know from reading scripture, that Judea and Samaria uh, are where so many of our biblical stories come from in
mm,
both the Old and the New Testaments. But the Palestinians have tried for decades to lay claim to something that simply is not based on archaeology, biblical fact, or secular history.
mm,
So that's why the biblical heartland is so important because it recognizes Israel's sovereignty as the ancestral homeland for the
mm.
Jewish people. So this is an ongoing discussion, and quite frankly, Jean-Marc, since 10/7, the two-state solution, which has been tried out, for decades, again, it is not even on the table for
Mm,
Israelis. There will never be a two-state solution
mm,
as long as Palestinians continue to murder and kidnap Jewish men, women, children, babies, and Druze and Muslims. It wasn't just Israeli Jews that were kidnapped and murdered. Anybody standing there was murdered on
wow.
10/7.
The interesting thing, one of the things that we are trying to understand is just you mentioned in one of our previous conversation about, you know, Palestine could be a wonderful place to live, if you know. And can you tell us a little bit about it? Because I think this is something that for our listeners, it's just a really, it's the actual conflict and the lack of understanding what is going on in Gaza and why is so much conflict as well and what's happening. And I think for us to kind of paint this picture to then let us take us to this the event that took place on October 2023, last year, a year and a half as well. So, can you paint us the picture of what Hamas or Palestine is, or what it could have been, provided? Because it looks like to me there was a place for them to be able to flourish, if I would say. But unfortunately, you know, decision made and made things very, very different.
You are exactly right in saying that. And of course, you know that the anti-Semitism and the Jew hatred has just gone into the stratosphere. It is so intense. It is a kind of propaganda that imitates exactly what Hitler did 80 years ago. But truth be told, Israel has worked on somehow blessing the Palestinians for a very, very long time, even before its modern founding in 1948. But Jean-Marc, here's what happened in 2005, and people forget this. Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza.
mm,
There were around 8,000 Jewish families that lived there and had greenhouses and synagogues and homes and schools. And every single Jewish person was removed by the Israel Defense Forces. They went in and had to face removing their own people.
mm,
Now, why would the prime minister at that time, Ariel Sharon, why would he do such a dramatic thing?
mm,
It was because they wanted to create a space where Palestinians could have a country.
mm,
They turned it over to the Palestinians in 2005. Not one Jew has lived in Gaza since 2005. So we need to be very, very clear about that. It's a fact. And then 2 years later, the Palestinian people who they tore down everything they could. When the last IDF soldier closed the gate, Palestinians just tore down everything that the Jewish people left behind to be a blessing to them, including
mm,
greenhouses where they could keep raising crops.
mm,
So this was an incredible situation. Then in 2007, they elected Hamas, the terrorist.
mm,
And now what we see is that billions of dollars that not only Iran's leaders have given to Hamas, but other countries, including the United States, including Great Britain, have donated to the Gaza Strip to help them.
mm.
What did they do? They built tunnels. I cannot remember the exact, I think it's around 300 miles of tunnels.
Wow.
There was they built an underground terror facility full of all kinds of weapons. And
Wow.
so when 10/7 happened, it happened out of that context that Israel has honestly, Israel is not a perfect country. The United States is not perfect. Great Britain is not. None of our countries are perfect, and none of
Mm,
us are,
mm,
and except for the unconditional love of the Jewish Savior. We would all be in a pretty bad situation.
mm,
So we're dealing with imperfect people in an imperfect world.
mm,
But the hatred that has unfolded in this world since Hamas uh, overran Israel on 10/7, you would think that the 2 or 3 days that everybody felt very sympathetic about it, that went away very quickly.
mm.
And this is what we're dealing with today.
This is a very interesting. I mean, we are talking about millions of pounds just spent on tunnels and missiles and everything. Just where they could have potentially built a better place.
Oh,
It's a very very
it could have
interesting.
been could have been a beautiful place in the Mediterranean. They could have
Mm,
had gorgeous hotels and jobs for every Palestinian that lived there and good
mm,
schools instead of teaching hate. They could have trained their children not to be terrorists, which is what
mm,
they have been doing, but to
mm,
have a fine education. They've abused their own children
mm,
with the hatred. They themselves have abused their own children, not
mm,
just Israeli children, not just Syrian children, which is going on right now, but anyone who stands in the way of their hatred. It's
mm,
a demonic infestation. I really don't know what else to call it. It's
mm,
demonic. We are seeing human beings inhabited by
mm.
demons.
Wow. I want us
It's
to take us to the event of October 2023. But before we do that, I just want us to play a clip can give you some aspect of what happened as well, and then we can just kind of discuss this, because obviously you're talking about this element of demons, demonic demonic basically situation here in Israel. But I mean, most importantly, this hatred, which I think when you think about it, is been there since since before. I mean, anti-Semitism hasn't just arrived. It's been there for quite a long time. And we're talking about a
Yes.
centuries of really that sense. But let's watch this video, and then let's see to try to talk about this what exactly happened, and really to kind of understand the situation, and then we can touch on the ceasefire, whatever it is, a ceasefire or not. That's another question that we can debate as well.
October 7th, 2023, 6:29 a.m. Air raid sirens started to blare in the early morning hours as Hamas unleashed a massive barrage of rockets from within Gaza. Those sirens were heard as far away from the Gaza border as Beersheba and Tel Aviv. Hamas would later claim that it fired 5,000 rockets during this initial attack, though the Israeli Defense Force, or IDF, says the number was likely closer to 2,500. 6:30 a.m. IDF observers at the Kisufim outpost identified Hamas terrorists attempting to storm the base's defenses. They activated remote firing systems to subdue the incoming horde, though those systems quickly ran out of ammunition. As all of this was happening, Hamas was coordinating a full assault that saw its militants storming fences in 60 other locations. Other fighters were entering Israel using paragliders, with many more attempting to enter by sea, using the training they'd displayed during the video footage from the 4th Strong Pillar exercise. 6:32 a.m. Inbal Rabin Lieberman was one of the first Israeli security coordinators to recognize what Hamas was attempting. As the security coordinator of kibbutz Nir Am, Rabin Lieberman ordered the opening of the local armory and equipped her security squad with the weapons they'd need to fight back against Hamas. 6:35 a.m. A Hamas rocket falls in central Israel's Kfar Aviv region, demonstrating just how well developed Hamas's rockets had become since the mocking that surrounded fireworks. This was the first rocket to claim a life. An older resident named Hannah Ben-Artzi became the first casualty among what would later grow to over 1,000. 6:36 a.m. More and more kibbutzim located near the Gaza Strip started reporting infiltration attempts by Hamas. Kisufim was one of the earliest targeted, with terrorists invading to fight against members of its security squad. Unfortunately, those forces weren't alerted early enough to fight off the invaders. Hamas killed 17 people in the kibbutz, including all of its security squad. 6:45 a.m. Holit is the next kibbutz targeted. Hamas has far more success here than it had in several of the other settlements. Around 40 terrorists stormed Holit, successfully breaching fences to the east and west. It took just minutes for the first home to be overrun. Many of the residents were either asleep or eating breakfast when the raid began, with Hamas militants moving from house to house, shooting at the metal shutters of safe rooms. There was a purpose to this shooting. The shots would reveal if anybody was inside. If the safe rooms were occupied, the militants used grenades and gunfire to breach them before killing the occupants. 7 a.m. Sirens blared at the Supernova Sukkot gathering in Raim, prompting hundreds of the music festival's attendees to flee. For many, the warning came too late. As the sirens sounded, Hamas militants arrived on trucks and motorcycles, surrounding hundreds of the festival goers. They opened fire, shooting into the crowd and throwing grenades. Many who had escaped into bomb shelters and the surrounding bushes were also tracked down and shot. It would become the single largest massacre that took place on October 7th. Hamas killed 364 people, most of whom were civilians, as well as taking around 40 hostages from the music festival. 7:40 a.m. By this point, Hamas fighters had successfully infiltrated deeper into Israel. Security forces were caught unawares in dozens of locations. The rocket attacks that led so many to run for cover had ended, but their purpose was now clear. They weren't the main strike. The IDF confirmed the rockets were just a cover, albeit a damaging one, for the waves of Palestinian fighters crossing into Israel. The infiltration was a success. Israel had been caught unawares, though Hamas wouldn't have to wait long before Israel issued a militaristic response. 9:45 a.m. As fighting on the ground continued and Hamas penetrated deeper into Israel, the IDF mobilized its air force. Hundreds of citizens in eastern Gaza were fleeing their homes to avoid Israeli bombs. The picture served as a potent reminder that many within Gaza were just as unaware of Hamas's intentions as Israel, just normal people attempting to survive a situation that was beyond their control. The October 7th terrorist attack may well go down in history as the point of no return for relations between Israel and Palestine.
Interesting. There's so much here to unpack as well, and I think that I want to start with this before going obviously we looked at this video and how accurate it was. You can tell us, Arlene, whether what you watched was very accurate. But for what we understand and what is being said is that Hamas has been plotting and coordinating this attack for quite a while. So this is not something that they decided on the hoop and they say, oh, okay, let's do this now. They planned it, they prepare it, they trained the people, and they knew exactly what they were going to target, and they use distraction as well to be able to
Yeah.
target those people. And now, the figures that we've been given was about over 1,200 people died during this Jew
Mhm.
killed during this massacre. I don't know whether that's an accurate
Yeah.
number,
Mhm.
but I think most of us remember the massacre at the festival. But it's quite interesting to see that many other cities in Israel were actually targeted, and as a matter of fact, people lost their life as well.
Oh, yes. Yes. Along what is called the Gaza envelope, many of the kibbutzim, many of the Jewish communities, they were overrun with terrorists. And quite honestly, Jean-Marc, I have not had the stomach for looking at the actual videos that the terrorists themselves took of the slaughter,
Mm.
the rapes, putting a baby in an oven,
Oh.
burning the baby, burning a family in their home, in a kibbutz, in their Jewish community, putting them together and burning them alive. And I'm just going to put it this way, okay? Just take your imagination, and we all understand that rape is a horrific crime. But what they did, the terrorists, in their rapes, I will not even speak
Mm.
about it. It's beyond anything you can imagine.
Oh.
So it's just, and everybody must keep in mind that it was Israel that was invaded. It was Israel that did not start this war.
Mm.
But any country and any community in the whole world, when they are invaded in such a cruel, bestial, horrific way, there simply are not enough words to describe
Mm.
what Hamas did on that day, where it is just incomprehensible.
Mm.
And I'm a wordsmith, and I have difficulty
Mm.
describing it. But when it happened, the Israel Defense Forces invited 4,000 journalists from all over the world to
Mm.
come to what is called the Gaza envelope, where the Jewish people had their communities, to come and see what had happened and to look at the actual videos that the terrorists themselves took
Mm.
with the phones that they brought in. They were
Wow.
proud. They were happy. They were delighted. It was demonic.
Wow. It's very interesting because Israel they have to show those videos for the community because the global community response, as you mentioned, Israel was being invited and targeted, and the community response was very interesting because a lot of question that people were asking is, are Israel action justify in in their response to this attack? And I think it was even some kind of condemnation towards Israel, the way they
Yes.
retaliated towards it.
Mhm.
And I think it took, as you said, Israel to show the atrocity that took place during this attack for people
Yeah.
to actually realize what was actually happening. For someone like myself or anybody else that just watching the news, we were not shown those videos or those images or those atrocity that took place. But I
You couldn't
guess
take it.
no, I don't think we would be able to take it. But
Mhm.
I guess it's just asking the question now, looking back a year and a half later and with the ceasefire and the release of hostages, where are we now? Are those hostages all been released, or is it still friction and tension? Does Hamas want to release the hostages? What exactly is going on at the moment?
One thing I want to say before we go there, Jean-Marc, is Israel, of course, as you mentioned, they're accused of all the things that I just mentioned.
Mm,
Israel is the most humane army in the world, alongside our American troops and your British troops. I'm sure they do all they can to be humane. But Israel has always let the civilians know we are coming.
mm,
Get out of this building. They created safe zones for the civilians. Israel did all this. It was just incredible what they did.
mm,
And of course, Hamas, they use their own people as human shields.
mm,
So I think it's very important to put the blame where it should be. Israel did not go into Gaza and bomb thousands of civilians in their apartments. No,
mm,
they made safe zones. They let them know they were coming, and it was at a great cost to the IDF itself, because when you say we're coming, then the terrorists are really waiting for them. But
mm,
now what we have, Jean-Marc, Israel, because I mentioned they have done so many things to structure some kind of peace, but they don't have a peace partner. It's non-existent because Hamas and its followers, as I have said, they are addicted to hatred. So Israel must defend itself. No country in the world would be able to sit by after all the experiences that Israel has had from terrorists, not just since 10/7, but for decades before that. They've
mm,
had to fight almost every day of their miraculous modern independence in 1948.
mm,
So this is an ongoing situation where the Jewish people themselves, they are people of life. Hamas and other terrorists are people of death. Israel glorifies life.
mm.
Hamas and its other proxies from the Islamic regime, they glorify death. They thrive on
Wow.
it.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine, especially for those of us in the Christian community, and not even the Christian community. There are a lot of Muslims that
Mm,
can't even comprehend what these terrorist groups, these proxies of the Islamic regime, are
mm,
carrying out.
mm.
So, yeah.
I want to invite our listeners on YouTube, Facebook, and Zoom. I can see you guys here listening as well. If you have any question, please feel free to put it in a chat, and we will make sure that we try to answer those questions for you guys. Quick question: do you think the ceasefire will last?
It never lasts. Israel's made many ceasefires over many decades
Yes.
with Hamas, with other Palestinian terrorists, and the Palestinian Authority over there in Judea and Samaria. These ceasefires are just, they're a joke, because the first ones to break the ceasefires generally
Mm,
are the terrorists. But Israel is not so sympathetic anymore. And would anybody blame them for not trusting? But Israel has tried to carry out these ceasefires, especially because there are still 59 hostages in the dark tunnels
mm,
underground in Gaza. And this is going to be very shocking to a lot of your listeners. I've got the statistic here. There are 24 remaining hostages that Israel thinks are alive.
wow.
There are 35 bodies.
Wow.
Try to take that in. Hamas is holding dead bodies of Jewish men, women, and children in the tunnels that they built with the billions of dollars that this world gave them. Not just the Islamic regime, of course, that's their biggest patron, but we in the whole world, our free countries. Let's help these Palestinians. Well, these Palestinian Hamas, thousands of trucks took food into Gaza since 10/7. What happens? Hamas kills the truck drivers, takes all the food, and tries to resell it at exorbitant prices. Look, and Israel gets accused of doing all of it. It's
Mm.
just quite fantastic in the most evil way imaginable. But
Wow.
there is no famine in Gaza. There is no famine. And the
Mm.
figures you're seeing about all the 40, 50,000 Palestinian civilians that have been killed, people are believing the Hamas Ministry of Health and their figures.
Wow. This is
Yeah,
this is this is incredible.
yeah,
This is an
it
atrocity
is.
on
Yeah.
reviling it before our eyes. And one of the question I wanted to ask you, and something that I wanted us to touch about, obviously you're a lot, you're a lot into mental health as well. And as a matter of fact, you wrote a book on mental health here, and I'm just going to put it on the screen for you, called Mental Health Meltdown. And tell us a little bit about the mental health in Israel, in relation to those atrocities that you just talked to us about.
Yes. What has happened in Israel is that the entire nation is traumatized. Every Israeli likely knows every soldier, every Jewish family member that's been murdered. So this is an entire nation who has been traumatized. It is ongoing. It is going to take a long time for recovery to go on. But the other thing that is so really magnificent about Israelis, God has planted within them, his
Mm,
people, a resilience that is also beyond imagination. For all they have gone through, they don't take the stance of being a victim. They take the stance of life.
mm,
Let's bounce back. Let's do the best we can in the most terrible of circumstances. So the Israelis are great examples for anyone who's going through a trauma because of their resilience. They
mm,
get attacked, they get up again, they do the best that they can. Now, the book that my husband and I just co-authored, it's a new book, Mental Health Meltdown, Illuminating the Voices of Bipolar and Other Mental Illnesses. We didn't write it for the Israelis. It sort of seemed to coincide when we began writing it, but we think that it has become a very helpful book for anyone who has read it, anybody who gives reviews, anyone that contacts us personally, because our book, we wrote it to help others hold on to hope. And
mm,
certainly Israelis, because of their traumas and because of what they have overgone in such intense ways since 10/7, the book is really one that is really something that is very timely. And we
mm,
have stories in it from 30, 35 other people, all Americans, but some of them are soldiers. There's a Muslim woman there, some soldiers, some Christians, and a couple of people in our book that don't have much of a faith, but
mm.
their stories, we wanted them to stand together in their stories with mental health struggles because they can help anyone who reads the book. And of
Yeah.
course, my husband, he represents the Jewish, you know, my husband is Jewish, so we have him there too, of course, as a co-author.
That's wonderful. Where can we find this book? I guess it's on Amazon, isn't it?
Oh, it's on Amazon. And
Hmm.
on Amazon, would love for y'all to buy it, to review it and let us know what you think. And I'm seeing Mary Ann's question here.
Yep.
What do I think about Trump's suggestion about relocation of the Palestinian people?
Hmm.
Look, um, Gaza is such a disaster. It is going to take a very long time for Israel has destroyed Gaza. They haven't destroyed all the Palestinians, as I have mentioned, by a long shot. But I think in some ways, President Trump thinks outside of the box. I think at this point, knowing that a two-state solution is dead, everybody needs to always remember what happened when Jews left Gaza in 2005. You see what it is, what they turned it into. And then what Israel, they were very patient for a very long time. So I think anything is worth exploring. That's what I would say, because the two-state solution is not going to be resurrected. There is no way that can happen.
So you definitely
So
think this is dead, isn't it? That two state is dead. Do you think is dead? There's no point that they will resurrect that at all.
I think it is dead. And frankly, I hope it is dead. And here's something else that, Marianne, I hope you're still listening, that is very important to understand. A lot of Arab countries, have said that they would help rebuild Gaza. That's great. I think that's an excellent offer. But I don't think the world realizes that the Arab countries do not want to take in the Palestinians of Gaza.
What's
The
that?
reason is, the reason is that when Yasser Arafat was alive, who laid the foundation for all of what's happening today, he was kicked out of 3 different countries before Israel opened a door. I think it was in the 1990s, and said, Yasser Arafat, why don't you come on in and, let's accept you into our Jewish homeland and hope for the best for the Palestinian people. Every country that Yasser Arafat's Palestinians settled in, like Morocco, I can't remember, there's 2 or 3 others. They were a disaster in every country they were in. They ruined every Arab country that took in Arafat and his Palestinians. So now the whole world is wondering now, especially after 10/7, why in the world would Israel take in Palestinian Gazans? You need to think about it.
It's very
Even the
interesting.
Arab nations are not willing. So
Mm.
as to Mr. Trump, President Trump, I'm all for, anything new that might be helpful.
So where do you think is going to relocate those Palestinians? This is Trump idea to think which area do you think that potentially if there was a relocation take place, especially now, I mean Gaza is pretty much in ruins now at the moment, isn't it,
It
after what's
is.
happening? So where
Yeah.
are those people going to be relocated, do you think?
There's already been a lot of talk about relocation into the Sinai. Israel gave the Sinai desert over to Egypt, in that time of the peace treaty. And to me, that honestly, that
Mm,
personally, that seems to be sort of a good solution. I mean, there could be a beautiful, beautiful, large area built up for Palestinians where they could have businesses and nice homes and crops. But Egypt doesn't want them either, not
mm,
even in the Sinai Desert. No Arab country wants them.
wow.
And it's a terrible, it's a catch-22. We've all heard that phrase. It's such a
Mm,
circular, complicated issue. No one wants the Gazan Palestinians. And unfortunately, Hamas has done a very thorough job of educating Gazan Palestinian children
mm.
in hatred.
This is a very, very interesting. Um, I'm just waiting. Thanks, Marian, for this question. It was a very, very good question. I'm just
Yes,
wondering something. We talked about the events, we talked about the ceasefire, which we don't know whether there will ever be a ceasefire, as you said. We talked about hostages still there, and obviously Hamas really dragging their feet really to release
Mhm.
whatever's left to be released. What about the surrounding Arab countries at the moment? What's their reaction? Because they seem to be quite silent, at the exception of Iran, obviously. But exactly what's going on in Syria as well, in terms of the war in
Mm.
Syria. So the surrounding Arab country, what are their position in relation to Israel at the moment?
Well, here's something that's fascinating that is going on. As you've brought up, Syria now has a new president.
Hmm.
And he is another jihadist. He's a terrorist. He came up through Al Qaeda and ISIS.
Wow.
So when he first took over and threw out Assad, who was not a good president for his people, he was a terrible dictator for against his Syrian people. But now what's happened? Some of the Western leaders, went there, and the terrorist Al-Jilani put on a suit and a tie. He looked very nice, very agreeable, but it was just a costume. Nothing
Mm,
changed in his character. So several Western leaders, some in Europe, even former President Biden, sent over a delegation after Al-Jilani, got Assad out of
mm,
there.
mm,
Um, and the terrorist Al-Jilani promised Mr. Biden's diplomat. She met with him in person, she and a small team, and he promised her that there would be no terrorism.
mm.
Really, does anybody? I mean, it was another mistake. You don't give somebody a reward before they prove out what their words say. So that's exactly what happened under President Obama and President Biden, that they gave Iran a lot of good good things,
Mm,
and that has not worked out well at all.
wow.
So now um, the Biden administration, there was a $10 million reward for tracking down Giuliani before he took over Syria as the president.
Mm,
Well, they removed the reward,
wow.
the Biden administration. They
Wow.
will just take the reward off. I mean, I'm smiling because it's just so absurd.
Mm,
It's it's just absurd. Again, I'm at a loss for words.
mm.
I
Are
don't
we
think President Trump's going to do that.
I'm not sure. I mean, are we seeing now? Because obviously we've got Iran on one hand that's going to continue their way of doing against Israel. Are we seeing
Yes.
Syria with these new leaders potentially to
Hmm.
kind of join forces with Iran and trying
Hmm.
to because I always go in the back of my mind this idea of some of the surrounding Arab country. They always got one thing in their mind. It's just to really destroy Israel, completely off the face of the earth. Um, and obviously,
Not since President Trump's Abraham Accords. A
mm,
lot has changed. The Abraham Accords, President Trump should have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize for that. The Abraham Accords are still in play. They're still there. And one other thing I forgot to mention, this is quite amazing. Israel, there are the Syrian terrorists are uh, murdering families of the minority groups in Syria. That
wow,
means the Alawites, the Druze, the Christian community, and oh my goodness, the other one's going out of my head right now. There are four communities that they are murdering. And Israel has reached out to the Druze in southern Syria and said, come, we want you come to the Golan Heights and we will give you employment. They're already sending in food to the Druze who live in Syria.
wow.
And the other thing is the Alawite community
Mm,
and the Christian community have sent letters to Prime Minister Netanyahu and said, would you save us? The Alawite community, who's being murdered along with the Christians, they are saying to Prime Minister Netanyahu, if you would save us somehow, we will greet you with songs and flowers. Now, this
This
is
is
quite an astonishing
mm,
situation.
this is interesting. This is very interesting.
Yes,
Arlene, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much here to really talk about, and I can see things moving in terms of political in a political arena. You know, the different things that's taking place at the moment. My last question, and obviously this is quite a topic that everybody's kind of still trying to get understanding what's going on. You know, do you think after what happened in Israel, you know, last year or year and a half, do you see Israel kind of strengthening their security system in terms of really kind of bothering them, because obviously they've been taken by surprise, and I guess they would go back and then review their operating system, their security system, and the borders, and how they actually protect the country in that sense. Is that what you see over the next few years? Um, Israel to be a little bit more tougher in decision when it comes to security.
they are already doing that because of what has happened, and they're investigating themselves, since 10/7, and that investigation is growing because Israelis want to, uh, they must protect their people as best as they can because the threats are too deep. Of course, they've practically wiped out Hezbollah. Lebanon, you know, is making
Yeah.
noises. Oh, we want to be friends with Israel. Yeah,
Mm,
wonderful. But Israel has really done a lot of excellent and humanitarian work. They have targeted the top leaders, many of
mm,
them, not the civilians, but targeted the top leaders and really done a lot to take care of their security. But I think it will increase. And the other thing that is so interesting is now under President Trump, we've got the United States Air Force and the Israeli Air Force flying low over Syria. And the reason they're doing that is to sending a message to the new president, Giuliani.
mm,
We're both here, Israel and the United States.
mm,
So hopefully the minority groups will find some kind of rescue from the terrible, these are massacres. They're taking bulldozers. The terrorists are using bulldozers to scoop up bodies
mm.
and bury them in mass graves from
Wow.
all the minority communities. It's absolutely, this is the nature of who they are,
Mm,
terrorists. We've got to, and that is not the nature
mm.
of the Jewish community.
Arlene, thank you so much again for being with us this evening and really to talk about Israel, the ceasefire, and everything as well. And again, I want to remind our listeners that Arlene just wrote this book called Mental Health Meltdown. You know, if you want to find this book, please just go on Amazon. Paul and Arlene, actually not Arlene alone, Arlene and her husband Paul wrote this book together, and I think that really just go to Amazon and just trying to get this book as well. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Arlene, and I guess we try to catch up with you again on another episode, maybe at the end
Yes,
of the year to
yes,
see how things developed. You know,
yes,
and hopefully,
yes,
it's probably not time. You know, we're late here in the UK, but I'm sure in the States
yes,
it's dinner time now, isn't it?
yes,
It's probably about 6 o'clock. You know,
yes,
we need to dinner
yes.
time. So, greetings from Atlanta, from Georgia, and
Thank
we
you.
see you soon. Thank you very much, Arlene. Thank you.
Well, the last thing I would want to say to anyone listening is
Mm,
that remember that our God is sovereign, no matter what
yes.
today looks like.
Mm.
God is sovereign.
Amen. Amen. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arlene, for that. Thank you. And we see you soon. Bye.
Thank
Well, that was Arlene Bridges Samuel. weekly columnist for CBN Israel, and it's just so fascinating what we heard today. And I know there's so many other stuff that we haven't covered, but we bring Arlene back here. I just want to let you know that our next fireside chat would be on fake news, and I will be joined by Noel Aji Michael. We're going to be talking about fake news. We're going to be talking about the destruction of faith using fake news. We're also going to be talking about disinformation, and we're going to be talking about the riot that took place last year in the summer, as well, and how fake news fueled those riots to a certain extent. So please, if you don't want to miss that, that's going to be on the 3rd of April, Thursday, 3rd of April from 9 p.m. We're also going to be launching a new podcast, just an audio podcast called The Mystery of Marriage. Me and my lovely missus, we're going to be talking about marriage and going to be covering many, many, many topics, including menopause from a man perspective and different topics as well. So please, we will send the information when it comes along. It's called The Mystery of Marriage, and we'll be launching this very, very soon, and hopefully you guys will be able to listen as well. Listen, it's been a wonderful time. I had a blast with Arlene. I'm always, I always learn something new every time Arlene come on the show as well. And I hope you have as well. So if you haven't been able to listen, you can always go back to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Go to our YouTube channel and really listen it to again as well. And we will see you soon. Actually, we will see you next month on the 3rd of April, and we'll be talking about fake news. See you soon, guys. Bye.